Dr. Andrea Holman. Welcome back to the show.
Greetings. Lovely to be back again.
Third time is a charm, they say.
Right. This is it. You're going to get it right this time.
So excited to have you back on the show. And this time we are talking about something that has been brewing in the background for a bit, and something that we get to collaborate on, partner on again. And we have this kind of running joke that, hey, every quarter, every year, we're going to find a way to do something.
This is great. We love this, right?
So grateful to have the opportunity to join you again in the art of storytelling, in the art of taking care of people, in the art of well-being through what will be Sip and Chat, which is a community initiative that is coming to LA. And what we're doing through these conversations, upfront conversations, is really laying the foundation for broader discussion that we'll be having around resilience, around hope, around how do you embrace the new once you come through this cycle of change? And there's just so much change happening out there in the world, devastation, politics, you name it. And Dr. Holman will be joining us as our expert in the room, psychologist in the room. And she'll specifically be touching on, in this first live experience that we'll be having, the psychology of resilience. Dr. Holman, welcome to the show once again. And I want to dive right in, and I want to ask you, or to really ground us in part of what this experience will be, what's the biggest misconception people have about resilience, especially in a world where we're constantly connected and always on?
So big question to start with. and really, I want to back up just a little bit, if I might, Antonio, to really talk about what resilience is, so that then we can really talk about what people commonly conclude or assume that it's not. So when we're talking about this idea of psychological resilience, right, we're talking about the ability to endure and continue to adapt despite what's going on around you, despite challenges in your life, setbacks, struggles, suffering, tragedy, right? That you're able to mentally, emotionally, behaviorally, all three of these things are important according to the American Psychological Association. You're able to adapt and adjust those things in order to continue to survive, and not only survive, but thrive in life. And so with that, when you're talking about adapting and adjusting how you are mentally and emotionally, that means that you actually have to name and acknowledge what's going on. You have to cope well. There's something about resilience that's very much tied to coping. So to answer your question, when you're talking about what people get wrong about or misunderstand about resilience, is they can miss that first part and they just concentrate on that last part of the definition. Resilience means I'm thriving, right? I'm moving through life. Whatever happens, I'm going through. And they just push through rather than effectively coping and adapting and adjusting how they cope to the current stressor. And I think that's really the main misconception, because then what happens is people can start to feel a little bit of a way. Resilience starts to have a little sting to it, right? It becomes this pressure to perform or to show up or push through in a way that doesn't acknowledge true pain and difficulty.
So yeah, kind of just bringing us back. So you'd mentioned coping. Is coping the connection to acknowledgement, or coming to that place of awareness where you first have to sit with whatever it is that you're dealing with to get to the other side of, okay, now I'm in a place where I'm thriving, versus trying to bypass that to just say, okay, on to the next thing?
I think of, at work, when I talk to people about coping, effective coping strategies, I always say that coping is a caring behavior, and you can care for what you're not paying attention to. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is acknowledge what is going on with you. You have to label the emotion. You have to understand, honestly, what's going on in your body a lot of time. Sometimes when we're in a great deal of distress or some suffering comes on, especially around in our world and our environment, our body reacts too. So if you are in tune with that piece to say, I'm really anxious right now, or this breaks my heart, I'm disengaged, I don't know what's going on, then you can cope with whatever is going on, because coping strategies aren't one size fits all. That's the essence of resilience, right? that you can adapt and adjust and apply certain tools and strategies that you need in the moment. So I think acknowledgement is really that first step. And then that can lead to you understanding more of what you need at that time.
Amazing. And you study the connection between identity and mental health. And so, how do our backgrounds and lived experiences shape how we process stress and trauma as we're thinking about coping and what that really means, particularly again in this age of social media and digital overwhelm, where it's so easy to feel like you have to be connected, you have to be in this, and you don't really have that space to step back and say, okay, I'm going to unplug and give myself the space to really feel so that I can move through life with this sense of resiliency.
Great question. I think it's very helpful and meaningful to also connect those two things together around the digital overwhelm, and then also to the difficulties that we face and needing to push through or get through those things. First thing I would say, just broadly speaking, when you're talking about identity and community and culture, background, and all of that, when we're talking about the experience of adapting and adjusting to difficult things, how many difficult things you've had in your life, right, is really going to dictate how you understand and experience that. What's going on in communities. We talk about this thing around like this race-based traumatic stress, for example, intergenerational trauma, those types of things, patterns in families, histories of abuse or misuse of people. And so there are groups of folks who have had varying levels, of suffering and difficulty. And there are some communities who've had more reps, right, in having to do this thing. So when we're talking about communities, I think we do have to look at the different ways that communities have been asked, or not even asked, but obligated to be resilient to survive, And so when we're coming back to think about, okay, how do these things impact folks, and how does digital overwhelm impact us? We're living in an age now where we have direct exposure to some really hard things, right? A difficult loss of life, or something happened, for example, hundreds of miles away from you, and you can see it real time in seconds, potentially. And so when we're talking about certain communities, there's a concept called shared racial fate, for example. Let's take race as anything. When we're talking about shared racial fate, you can see yourself in that person. You can see your brother or your uncle or your sister as somebody who could be impacted by this thing that you're watching. And that starts to give us a level of distress, added distress, that we maybe wouldn't have if we did not have that visual pairing with that news knowledge. The news cycle is constant, right? I mean, there's always something to react to. So our bodies don't even get that, our bodies and our minds don't get that chance to rest and repeat, right? Our nervous systems don't get that full exposure of having fight or flight or freeze and then a reprieve to catch our breath. And I've heard people say this time and time again, especially in the last several months. It's too much and I can't process. I don't even know where to start, right?
Yes.
Don't people say that? You feel that deeply. Yeah,
Yes.
we're not set up for that. You know what I'm saying? Our brains aren't set up for that, for a constant chronic stress. We know that because the impact of chronic stress is devastating on our minds and our bodies. And so when you're talking about digital overwhelm, I think that's something really unique to talk about, is how that can impact all of us who are connected in terms of the media and the internet and technology, but also how that can impact certain communities and certain identity groups.
Specifically, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to give it all away here. I do want to save some of this for our live conversation on stage, where we'll definitely be going deeper into this. But for anyone that may be thinking about, like, okay, where to start, or coming into this experience, what are some things that I could be thinking about to just get me to this place of, okay, I'm ready, I'm willing to try. Like, what's one small but powerful mental shift that someone can make today to start healing and reclaiming their sense of balance in this chaotic world? And specifically, again, as we're bringing in this digital element and angle where we have this endless cycle of scrolling and overstimulation, what's that place where it's like, okay, this is the shift that I can make right now to start healing, start reclaiming my sense of balance?
Yeah, great question. Can I be oppositional and choose two things?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay. So the first thing actually I think is helpful, especially when you're talking about digital overwhelm and those kind of difficult, challenging experiences, being inundated with news and information about those things. I think oftentimes for me and for people that I know, and I think other folks who may be listening, that constant assembly line, or kind of a perpetual motion around news, media, and coverage makes you feel like you have to be a passive participant, that it just happens to you, that you are scrolling, you're watching TV, you're hearing things on the radio, and all you have to do is you have to take it. But I would actually recommend something different. I would say that you can exercise your power to choose. You don't have to be exposed to much of that stuff. There's absolute agency, to use that word. You can choose. You can give yourself limits. So you can say, I'm only going to look at the news, or maybe even if it's social media, for example, I'm only going to do that during these times. You can say, I'm not going to do it at all. There's more and more folks who say, I can't engage on certain platforms and certain ways of interacting. I myself have said sometimes that, somebody will contact me. If something's going on that is truly intense, somebody will let me know. I can choose. I can choose when to engage or disengage. I can change the subject. All right. And so that type of choice to be fully present where you are, rather than needing to feel like you have to connect to be connected to other humans, unnecessary. The second thing I would say, actually from a conversation with a friend of mine, Liz said something very poignant. She said, resiliency and rest are not mutually exclusive. That you can actually choose to rest, to slow down, to be in tune with your body and your nervous system, and to take things one step at a time so you can truly be purposeful about how you're going to respond and endure certain situations. And that way you can move towards thriving, but you can rest in the meantime. Resiliency doesn't mean non-stop action.
There's power in rest.
Absolutely. There's resiliency in rest. Mm-hmm.
That.
Yes. And now this is something, we won't get too far into this because I do want to talk about this more at the event in person, but you can also release yourself from the pressure to be the person to get other people through things. So sometimes I think there's groups of folks who say, I got to push through, I got to be quote unquote resilient because people are counting on me, because I have to show up this way, because I set these standards for myself. And that I think we could challenge to say, no, you're worth taking care of too.
100%. And yeah, I remember this was one that we covered at an event last year, and just seeing the room like, oh, wait. That's me.
That's me. Yes. Yes. You don't have to show up.
Even myself, I'm like, at times, like, yeah, that's me too. And having to be mindful and intentional about creating space to really step back and fill my cup up so that I can keep giving to others.
True. I think there's something about embracing humanity that's truly beautiful and restful and resilient. There's something about resilience that people misunderstand as being superhuman, or not having anything let you break a sweat. And that's just not true.
I feel like resilience will be the theme of the decade. The rate that we're moving, the pace, the nature, it's like, okay, this is one added to the textbooks.
Sure. And I do think, when we're talking about rest and pace and that agency, you get to choose that too, to some degree. I know there's a lot of things outside of our control, right? And that we have to figure out how to respond to. But if there's a point at which, when you are reflecting on yourself and your body and your health, if you're saying, I don't want to move this fast anymore, where I don't want to always have to be the strong person to show up and be the good person in a storm, that type of thing. If I want to slow down for a little bit, you can choose to do that too. And I think that even can lead to a level of endurance and inner peace that I think we all could maybe benefit from.
And clarity. Clarity for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yay. This and So much more to come at our live event on March 28th at the Industry Loft in Los Angeles. Dr. Holman is such a great storyteller, so good with people, and we are so honored to have you as part of the experience. Is there anything specific that you're excited about, or really looking to bringing to this newfound community that we're developing?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you for those very kind words. I'm very excited to participate in this. I want to really have the conversations with people that will spur a level of rest and resiliency, but I want to really dig into the ways in which this word sometimes does have a little bit of a negative connotation to it, or people begin to resent it because of what they feel pressured to do. And I'm excited to lean into those conversations and talk about how there can be a level of freedom from that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Holman, and thank you to everyone else that took the time to tune into this. We have a couple more episodes coming for you in this same vein. You'll be hearing from some of the other facilitators. Again, we are just laying the foundation for this broader conversation that we'll be having throughout the year. Please continue to come back, check in. We'll be sharing snippets from the event itself, so you'll get to hear us go a little bit deeper into these conversations. Thank you all so much for the support and love, and I hope to see you on March 28th.